to Inks and Issues, a podcast where we do in-depth discussions on a single comic book. I'm your host, Jonah Gregory, and my house spirit only eats gluten-free bread because she's a gosh dang millennial. And with me today is my co-host, Kieran Bennett.
Hi, my name's Kieran, and when I asked my parents how they found me, they said it was malnourished, on the verge of hypothermia, and with a belly full of mushrooms.
And today we're talking about Bryan Lee O'Malley's Seconds, a graphic novel. I guess that's how you know it's a graphic novel.
Yeah, because it says it in the title.
Right. Well, it's like that thing where, and I don't know what the differentiation is, but I know there are some of those novels out there that say that, like, whatever their title is, a novel. It's like, really? You got, like, are you sure?
You got to put it on the tin? You sure? Bread. It's a food.
Yes. So, Karen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Have you read anything interesting lately?
Okay, so last episode, or it might have been the episode before, one of our JoJo episodes, I said that I hadn't gone into my comic book shop for ages and ages.
Yes.
So I finally did.
Yay.
And let me tell you, $175 later.
Oh, boy. How many One Pieces did you buy?
Well, none, unfortunately. But
no, there's not a new one quite yet.
Yeah. I think next one comes out in February, which I'm very excited for. So I've canceled a bunch of series now because,
just too much.
Might have gone a little bit crazy. Yeah. But I have just finished, this will be really old, but like I just finished, the latest, Justice League Dark. Which is, I think Justice League Dark is really good, cause it's like Justice League, but fantasy, which is extremely my jam. And I was also reading the main Justice League title at the same time. And the Justice League title just was not doing it for me. So I dropped that, unfortunately, which is a shame because it was Scott Snyder attached to it. And he's a good writer, but, I just wasn't really enjoying it, but I think Justice League Dark is way cooler. And they're just starting up like a new storyline. So if you want to hop on that, then, get on that, as soon as you can, because I think it's really good.
Yeah.
And I also started reading the new, The Green Lantern by, Grant Morrison.
Okay.
With art by Liam Sharp, who I think we actually talked about, when we did Wonder Woman, way back in the day. And like episode 4 or whatever the hell it was.
Right.
That's really awesome. It's super weird. It's like, It reminds me a lot of like the Green Lantern and like sort of sci-fi comics from like the 80s or like the 70s. Where it's just like real, he's one of the insect people from Thrakbar 3 next to the Fanblarian moon. And it's like, none of this really makes a lot of sense, but I'm just kind of digging it. Yeah,
it sounds like my jam, so I might have to check this out.
I think you would actually quite enjoy it. So those are probably my two highlights that I've been reading at the moment. What about yourself?
I jumped back into One Piece and I finished. Oh man, where am I at? 17, 18, and 19, I think, are the 3 I read the other day. So,
is that like East Blue, where they're like at the Barati?
The Baroque Works are who they're fighting right now.
Shit! Is that far? Okay,
yeah.
Right.
So they're in some sort of desert town, and there's lots of shenanigans going on. And a man named Crocodile, who has giant pet crocodiles, is trying to take over everything.
Yeah, Crocodile fucking slaps. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's like Sandman except a pirate and way more evil.
Yeah,
because he ate the sand fruit. And the scene
did.
Where is it? I can't remember which one. I think it might have been Vivi that just knocks his head off, and it looks like she just straight up murders him before you know what his powers are. And then he reforms. That whole scene was amazing, by the way. This story arc is actually making me want to go watch the anime because I just want to see some of these scenes animated now. Yeah. Because they're super cool.
Yeah, I think the Baroque Works, like the Alabaster arc in there is it's probably one of my favorites, out of all the ones that I've read so far. It's super awesome.
Yeah, it's very good. And speaking of One Piece, So this happened a long time ago. Skechers, the shoe company, teamed up with One Piece and released some themed shoes that are like the color schemes of different characters. And a while back, there's one in the outlet mall that's like not too far from where we live, and they had several of them, but only in women's sizes. And we went there the other day, and they had finally gotten in the men's sizes. So I bought the Zolo and Luffy ones because I needed new shoes anyway, and they're really nice.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm all in on One Piece now, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Hell yeah. I can't wait for when we review One Piece on the show.
All of it.
Like, obviously, we have to do all 87 volumes.
Well, by the time we get to it, there will probably be 100 of them. So,
okay. Well, then we'll just wait until there's 100, and then we can just do all 100.
Yep. Should that be a stretch goal of some kind or whatever Patreon goal? If we unlocked that and the Garfcast, would we even have time to record normal episodes anymore?
No, we would not.
Yeah, I'm hoping in the new year scheduling becomes a little less insane, but I highly doubt that. So,
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't hold my breath.
So anyway, but today we're talking about Seconds by Bryan Lee O'Malley, like we mentioned at the top of the show. And you may know him from our episodes where we reviewed Scott Pilgrim. And if you're a patron, you also heard our review of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie. And that's the first real movie review episode we've done, because the only other movie episode we've done was our first live show at GeeklyCon a few years ago. So you can dig back into the archives and grab that. And if you'd like us to do more movie reviews, you can unlock that on Patreon as well. That is actually
give some goddamn money.
Yeah. So it all just takes time and money and all that fun stuff. So if you can help us provide the money, we will provide our time. That's our guarantee to you, the listener.
That's our guarantee.
All right, Kieran. So do you have any fun facts for us about Seconds?
I do have a couple of fun facts. Right. So Seconds, as we said, by Bryan Lee O'Malley. It was the follow-up that he did to Scott Pilgrim. I was about to say Versus the World, but as we all know, that is the movie. Mm-hmm. So it was first published in 2014, all the way back in 2014. So he wrote it and he also drew it as well as with an assistant art by Jason Fisher, letters by Dustin Harbin, and colors by Nathan Fairbairn. Oh, damn. Sorry, man. It would have been too good to be true if there was a comic that didn't have at least one person whose name I didn't know how to pronounce. So I cannot find the article that actually talked about this, unfortunately. But one of the things I found really interesting about the development of Seconds compared to Scott Pilgrim is that obviously if you have a copy, Seconds is in color, while Scott Pilgrim initially was not in color. It was in black and white. Now, apparently the reason for this was that Bryan Lee O'Malley basically did Scott Pilgrim, and again, I wish I could find the quote. I wish I could find the article. So I'm really quite heavily paraphrasing him here. But basically he produced Scott Pilgrim, and a lot of people assumed that Scott Pilgrim and everyone in the story was white. Mm-hmm. And basically he was like, oh, I completely unintentionally did that because, I really like to see comics that have people who look like me in them. So when he did Seconds, he very deliberately made it in color so that everyone could kind of tell like who everybody was, and so that he could kind of have a lot more control over representation in the comic, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't see that exact one.
No, if anyone knows where the fuck that interview is where he says that, please let me know, because I cannot find it anymore. Yeah. I knew I should have bookmarked it at the time, but I was a fool.
That's fair.
And those are your fun facts?
I didn't know if you had more than that. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. Sorry, but I really had to take a drink of water.
Yeah, I was waiting. I was very patiently waiting through that drink of water.
But thank you.
Okay, well, let's get into it then. So Seconds is not broken up in the same way that most of the stuff we review is. A lot of these standalones, we kind of always have to start with that caveat. So we'll have to just kind of find natural breaking points to discuss rather than being like, well, that was book 1. What are your thoughts on this?
What are your thoughts?
So this,
you've written like parts and stuff. In
these
notes,
I marked down where the different parts of the story, because it does have kind of chapters, but some of them are like a page or 2, depending on what's happening in them. So this story starts with a really short intro where we see a giant tree floating in space. A real Yggdrasil. Katie, who is our protagonist, wakes up to a mysterious woman sitting on her dresser and speaking to her. And she's told by this mysterious woman, if things go wrong, don't forget. The woman then disappears into the top drawer of the dresser and the room goes dark. She wakes up the next morning and doesn't remember any of this. We're told. So
classic.
Yeah. Part 1 is called Katie, and Katie is our protagonist. She's a chef. She, is described as sleeping too little, worrying too much, and she's turning 30 soon. So she feels like she's getting, pretty old. She's starting to feel old, which it's one of those things, I've #relatable. I'm in my late 30s now. I can no longer even say mid 30s. And,
#relatable content.
Yes. Well, it's funny because the transition from 29 to 30 felt like it was going to be a very big deal. And then in my 30s, I'm just like, yeah, this is actually fine. Like, I actually feel like a real adult these days, which I did not do at any point in my 20s. So,
in my 20s, can't confirm that's true.
Yes. So, Katie is actually, even though she's feeling old and like she doesn't have things together, she's actually been fairly successful. 4 years before the story, she had started a restaurant with her friends, and it is called Seconds. Since then, a lot of her friends had already moved on, and she had to hire younger people. So this much younger staff is actually one of the reasons she's not feeling young anymore, because this young staff has committed the crime of being born later than her, and she's feeling very self-conscious about this. But her dream is actually to open a second restaurant. She already has a location picked out, which is this really kind of cool but rundown old building. It's this large, ancient, kind of decrepit, currently looking building. And it's the former home to a place called, they sometimes call it Lucknow, but it's called Lucky's on the sign. So I refer to it as Lucky's probably throughout the rest of this episode. I don't know. Lucknow is a weird name. Lucky's seems like more like an actual restaurant you would find. So we'll just go from there. But it's been abandoned since she was a kid. So for whatever reason, she's always felt drawn to this restaurant, or like this building in particular. And so for whatever reason, even though there was like a slightly better location that was cheaper and everyone's like, hey, just do that one, she like refused. She had to have this building. We meet her business partner, Arthur, and he has actually been the one trying to get the second restaurant up and running, like kind of handling contractors and all that stuff. And we find out she's going to name this one Katie's. So naming it after herself rather than the other one being called Seconds. And, as we find out, like, there's been problems with permits. There's always there's always issues. Then they can't quite figure out why. Yeah. Every time they fix one problem, more crop up. And she describes waiting for it to open as hell, and Seconds is her purgatory. So she goes back to Seconds. We see her schmoozing around with the different customers and find out she's actually incredibly good at her job. Like, she's really good at running the house. She's an amazing chef. And it's actually one of the big sticking points is Seconds actually doesn't belong to her at all. It's another friend of hers, Raymond, and his boyfriend have actually put the money up. So they're the real owners, which is one of the reasons she's checked out, essentially. Like, she's like, okay, I'm going to start this other thing. And it was supposed to all be ready. So she's basically now waiting because she's already trained her new chef, who we meet, who's Andrew. And it's like she's all ready to go, but the building's not ready. So she's already basically quit her job, but she can't leave because her new one's not there. So Raymond's kind of always giving her crap for just like hanging out in this restaurant that's no longer hers. And she's not, not the chef anymore, but everyone just still refers to her as if she's like the head chef, even because all the recipes were made by her and she's who kind of put it on the map because it's pretty successful. We also meet her ex, who she is all mad when she finds out, or when she thinks he's on a date with this girl who she's like, how could he be on a date in my restaurant? Because it's, they've been together off and on. And turns out it's just his kid sister who's now 19, and she still thinks of that person as 12. And that just kind of is to further solidify, I think, that this like feeling
she's
like
old.
She's getting old, and people are growing up, and the ones that used to be the little kids are now adults and whatnot.
Ugh, gross.
And so when we meet Andrew back in the kitchen, the new chef, they start butting heads, but we also find out that they have been secretly smooching in the pantry. Ooh. Which that's a plot line that comes back in a pretty big way later.
Yeah, it does.
So back at the kitchen, one of the servers, Hazel, who is also becomes a quite important character as the story progresses. She's this new younger person who's kind of ditzy, and she's pretty likable but quiet, so she hasn't really started to fit in or anything, But she has an accident in the kitchen and ends up getting grease burns on both of her arms because she tries to, she's so quiet, she doesn't want to like even say excuse me to the other employees. So she tries to kind of sneak behind one of the cooks and ends up knocking this like pan of hot grease all over herself. Which is just the thought of that just makes me cringe because burns are
hot grease.
Having worked in a kitchen and getting burns a lot because I was, I'm a clumsy person. That just sounds awful to get them all over yourself like that. It's bad. So, Katie and Andrew are both feeling very guilty for what happened because they weren't there supervising like they're supposed to be because they were smooching when they were supposed to be working. So, she's kind of wallowing in her guilt. And that night, Katie is visited by the mysterious woman from the intro and given a box that contains a notepad with the title, My Mistakes, a single mushroom, and these instructions. 1, write your mistake. 2, ingest 1 mushroom. 3, go to sleep. 4, wake anew. And so she's like, yeah, why not? So she writes down how she wants to not have accidentally, caused Hazel to burn her arms horribly with grease, and takes the mushroom, goes to sleep, and then we get to revision 1. Katie, in this revision, still flubs things with Max because she kind of forgot that happened, but is able to keep Hazel from burning her arms. So,
well.
What do you think so far? That's
I was pretty sold.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest. Like I was like, it really kind of grabbed me like. Pretty much straight away. Not necessarily with the intro. I thought the intro was a little abstract to kind of like pull me in too much. But Katie is, as we jokingly said, but I will now say it seriously, she is pretty, hashtag relatable.
Yes.
Like she's not out of her depth, but she's kind of floundering a little bit. She doesn't know what she's going to do next. She has a hard time kind of following on from success and that sort of thing. I mean, like these are all feelings that I think everyone can kind of get on board with. And so, you immediately have a very relatable protagonist. And then, the kind of the setup of all the characters is really good. It's the same as Scott Pilgrim. All the other supporting characters are also quite interesting as well. And then the immediate kind of introduction of that fantastical element is really interesting. And it is also significantly helped by the fact that the book is very good looking and very, very nice. It's like it feels nice to read. You know what I mean? Like it's nice on your eyeballs. I would not recommend placing it directly upon your eyeballs, unless that's like your thing. But it is a very good looking book, and like it's obvious like a lot of time and effort has really gone into like making all the colors very interesting and making all the layouts really good. And yeah, I think it's really good. So yeah, I was pretty well sold by the end of part one. What about yourself?
Yeah, I actually read this back in 2014. I believe I was much like the Andre the Giant comic. I believe I was working on Sayer episodes at the time and was just like, I'm going to take a quick break and read this, and ended up reading like the entire comic, even though it's like 300 something pages, because it was just that compelling. Oh, yeah. And I liked the intro, like that, like you said, that little tiny intro is like too abstract, and you just kind of read it going, okay, well, this is obviously going to tie into something later. So you just kind of read it and kind of forget about it for a bit, which may have kind of been the intent, since Katie also forgets about it for quite a while.
Fair.
Yeah. And because she doesn't even remember that part until quite a bit later. And I like the character of Katie a lot, because even though she's a flawed person, she does feel very real, but also like a cool person that you would want to hang out with, unlike Scott from Scott Pilgrim, who you're like,
have we mentioned that Scott Pilgrim sucked ass?
Where you're like, why do all these people hang out with him? Whereas with Katie, you're like, oh yeah, I can see why all these people are her friends. Like, they have things in common, and she actually tries hard to treat her friends well, but she's also not good at relationships and stuff, and is like working on not being so self-centered. But she's like, she's good at what she does, which is another difference with her and Scott. I think she's actually competent. And
I really liked the inclusion at the start, where it was like, this is the restaurant that she's established, but like, it's successful. Yeah. It's done really well. Right. And it's because of her that it has done really well. I feel like if the sort of the setup of the story had been like, this is the restaurant, it hasn't really gone that well, it's kind of struggling, so now she's trying to move on. Like, it would have had like a different feel, like a different vibe to it. But I think it's like, because she's trying to follow up on previous success, I think in some ways that almost makes her like a better character, because, you know, she's not like just constantly floundering at the bottom. She's actually trying to like achieve more than she's already done, which I think like in some ways makes her more relatable in a way.
Right. So, why don't you go ahead and jump into the next couple parts here then?
I will. So Katie goes to the hospital, but Hazel, the girl who got the burns, she isn't there. So she drives to Hazel's home to check on her and meets her grandmother. And she's shocked to find that Hazel has no burns on her arms. And she talks to the staff at Seconds, and they have no idea what she's talking about with the accident, and even say that she was being uncharacteristically nice the previous night. And so with nothing better to do, Katie stalks Hazel around the kitchen, and Katie learns that the other staff haven't really warmed up to Hazel because she's so timid and acts like a shy kid. After hours, Hazel is found sweeping, starting a fire, and leaving gifts of clothes and food for the house spirit she's trying to keep happy. Hazel explains that her grandmother told her stories of house spirits, and if you take good care of them, they'll take good care of you. And if it stops being happy, it'll make your life hell. The next morning, Katie checks the fire, which is barely still going, and finds the clothes and bread are gone.
Dun, dun, dun.
So Katie's having buyer's remorse over choosing Lucky's as the new location instead of Talmadge?
I don't know how to pronounce it. It's
probably a Canadian word.
It might be. I mean, it's probably French then, because right? No, there's not enough vowels that aren't pronounced for it to be French.
Yeah, that's true. So Katie's having buyer's remorse over choosing Lucky's as the new location instead of Talmadge. She has been craving mushrooms, and in classic Bryan Lee O'Malley style, there is a very pretty drawing of the saddle of rabbit with parsnip puree and soy brewed shimeji mushrooms Katie makes. Unfortunately, he does not provide the recipe, which is a massive shame.
It's a huge bummer, because that looked delicious.
It looks really nice. So the staff all try the dish and love it until Katie reveals it's for the new restaurant. This part made me really sad. Like, it's just like, oh, I felt really bad for her.
Yeah.
So they then give her the cold shoulder, which causes Katie to depress, eat, and cry in the pantry. Again, hashtag relatable.
Yeah, exactly.
Where she discovered... Whom among us has not been sad and eaten a lot? Where she discovers strange mushrooms under the floorboards. She sneaks the mushrooms upstairs and has a bath while she thinks about what she wants to change. She comes out of the bath to find the white-haired girl holding the mushroom. She tells Katie everyone only gets one and that she used it. there are rules. Katie learns that the girl's name is Liz and that the dresser is hers. Katie snatches the mushroom and tells Liz to leave. And as a parting gift, Liz rearranges all the furniture in the apartment.
Yeah, she has
Katie
some kind
Hazel.
of weird, like, telepathy, but it only is ever used for rearranging furniture, which cracked me up.
Honestly, like, she could make absolute bank if she just used that for, like, a moving company.
Right. Sorry to interrupt. That part cracked me up where you find out, like, this house spirit is real and has weird powers, but they seem to only revolve around moving furniture.
Yeah. I'll make your life a living hell, and I will adjust your couch only a few inches to the left so you're watching TV, and something's wrong, but you don't know what it is.
Oh, I hate that. Sorry, go ahead.
See? It would mess with you.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway. So Katie finds Hazel drawing Liz, but she claims to have made her up, and that is what she imagines the house spirit looks like. She takes Hazel upstairs and finds that only she can see Liz. As a parting gift, Liz rearranges all the furniture in the apartment again. This time, Hazel was there to witness the rearranging of the furniture.
Right.
Katie sneaks to a drive-thru burger place and has a big, greasy burger and fries. Again, relatable.
Yes.
Back at the restaurant, she sees Max, and her attempt to flirt ends in a toilet disaster. Then she finds the notebook again.
Hashtag relate. Oh, man, that scene made me just kind of cringe. Like, yeah, been there. So
Yep. Just absolutely bombed super duper hard.
Hey, Ben, hashtag sup, y'all. All right.
Hey, sup, y'all. Yeah. Oh, my God. And the revision that Katie does is she changes things so that when she eats a salad instead of the burger, and she then tells Max that he should call instead of acting like a stalker, and she wakes up feeling primo.
Yes.
But what I wanted to say was, like, I think at this point, like, it's I don't want to say it's a hallmark of Bryan Lee O'Malley's work, but it is something that Katie has in common with Scott Pilgrim, and like that I've sort of noticed across both works. Is that like Bryan Lee O'Malley is not afraid to have his characters like not necessarily suffer, but just have like just crappy things happen to them.
Yeah, that
are not necessarily like tragic or particularly heartbreaking, but like Katie just crapped herself almost in front of someone that she really liked, which makes her very relatable.
Yeah. It's his, he's willing to put these, like minor embarrassments to really good use for the story, I think is something I appreciate in his work. These two parts I really enjoyed because we get to meet Hazel, who's, I actually really like her character because she's like knowledgeable about this weird folklore because she grew up with it. So that's like, she helps move the story along, but it also gives Katie someone to kind of play off of, because otherwise the whole story would just be like nobody believing her. And that's a thing in a lot of stuff. And it's like, this gives her,
God, it's the fucking worst.
Yeah. It's such a trope. And it's like, it's just boring because it's like, well, if the other characters don't believe them, there's nowhere to really go from there. Except for like spending a bunch of time convincing them. So, and Hazel's like such a like innocent person that she's just like, well, you're the boss and I trust you. So if you say so, I guess it's real.
I guess it's true. Yep. Yeah. Honestly, well, like one of my least favorite tropes is the like, no, this is real, and like because of this, and people are just like, yeah, and like, you know, brush it off kind of thing. And so like I am really glad that Hazel is just like, yep, no, you're 100% correct. We can totally roll this, because it's like, okay, sweet. Now we've got someone else on board, and we can like kind of advance things here, and we don't have to waste any time pissing about with other stuff. So we can get to the interesting things. Which I really appreciated. But yeah, these last two parts are really awesome. I think they're really good.
Right. And I did like how she went from using the one revision she's supposed to get from Liz, which is like altruistic in a way, because she used it like, yes, she messed up, but she did use it. It's basically like using one of your genie wishes to like help someone else instead of yourself, which I thought was really cool. But then of course, as soon as she realizes she has this power, she like immediately like wants to do something so petty, which is eat a hamburger. Which
it's like the first one is like, I would like for someone to not suffer a scarring injury. And then the second one is, I don't want to poop myself in front of my ex-boyfriend.
Right. It's just, I love the trajectory of like how quickly it just goes to her just doing something petty with that power.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, who wouldn't use this crazy power to just benefit yourself in weird ways, right? It'd be hard not to.
I'd be eating so many friggin' mushrooms if I was just stopping myself from pooping all the time.
All right, so let's get into part 4, rules. So this is where we kind of get some more info about the whole mushroom situation. So back at Lucky's, we get to see that the crew, you know, they've been still going through the building and still not progressing as fast as it's supposed to be. And while they're cleaning things out, they find a bunch of old junk. So they ask Katie, hey, this is technically your property now. So do you want any of this old junk? And one of the things they find is this kind of cauldron looking pot. So they keep calling it like a witch's pot jokingly. And they even imagine Hazel while she's holding it looking like a witch for one panel, which I thought was pretty funny. And even the characters start cracking up about that too. And, and she's just like, what's so funny, guys? And it's filled with some like dirt or ashes or something, as Hazel describes it. And when Katie looks in it, she sees the tree from the beginning of the book and is just like, I guess in denial, because she never really brings it up again. She's just like, no, I'm not seeing things. Everything's fine. This is fine. Let's go back to Seconds.
Yeah. So this is all good.
Yeah. So she takes the pot back to Seconds and dumps the ashes onto the mushrooms, thinking they'll make good fertilizer, and in quotes, or something, because that is another Bryan Lee O'Malley thing of being like, or something, or just because, or whatever, like having those little word whiskers, as some people call them, like at the end of sentences. And then she takes a cauldron full of mushrooms with her upstairs. And
this can only go well.
Yeah, this is only going to go well. So she immediately becomes mad with power, and we see revisions 3 and 4 very quickly happen, which are she gets really, really drunk and undoes that. And then she stays up all night binging fake Netflix, which is called Videos with a Z, which I always appreciate terrible names like that in stories. Yes, Beppis. So it's pretty hilarious because, like we were saying, she immediately gets incredibly petty with these. And then she immediately takes it too far, because in revision 5, she uses it to have guilt-free sex with Andrew. And that is pretty messed up.
Yeah, it was real skeevy.
Yeah. So that way, even if they fought afterwards or whatever, it's like, it's fine because it didn't happen, but to her it did. And yeah, it's not good. It's pretty bad. So the next day, Katie gets an email saying that she needs $12,000 for the contractors, and she has like a day to get it to them or else they're going to walk. So it's like she's in very dire straits with that building at this point. Liz shows up to tell her there are rules to the mushrooms, and she's already had way too many. Like, all these revisions are obviously something bad is going to happen, but you know, Katie's drunk with power. So her response is to grab the cauldron and run out to the car, because Liz is a house spirit. She can't leave the house. So she can't get to the mushrooms if they're not in the building. And she discovers by trying to use them in the car that they also only work on the property. So they are also tied to Seconds, the building that Seconds is in. So she actually tries to eat one of them, and she can't even chew it up. Like, she spits it back out and it's still completely full after chewing it.
Yeah, it's still completely whole, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. So it's showing like, oh, so the mushrooms are definitely something that's magic. It's not just the house. It's not just Liz or whatever. Like, they all have their own little role within this, which I thought was kind of interesting. Cause like the mythology building stuff in any story with kind of like magical properties, like if you don't have rules, then it's no fun. Like, it's just do whatever you want all the time because it's magic. And if you don't put down firm rules, it doesn't work, which I think is one of the things that definitely works well in this, is he established these are the rules, and if you don't follow the steps, things don't work out.
Something bad's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really the only way magic works. Let's see.
Never listen to my podcast
then. Sorry. Well, that's just D&D in general, isn't it? Hey. So after proving to Hazel that Liz is real by getting her to show up, by putting like the bread and stuff like Hazel was doing before. Also, they get to make the bread makes you fat joke again, because I guess that is just a running joke that Bryan Lee O'Malley loves.
I wonder if Bryan Lee O'Malley ate a bunch of bread and someone told him the bread makes you fat, right? And he's like, I've got to get this out to the people. Yes. They got to know about this.
And so they kind of start to bond. They talk about relationships and stuff. And then this makes Katie realize that she can fix her relationship with Max because pretty much the entire relationship happened on the premises, like while they worked together at Seconds. So she writes basically like a huge journal entry about them and their relationship in the book, and then eats another mushroom, and we get revision number 6, where she wakes up next to Max, but she has a vision of a darkness growing out from the floorboards where the mushrooms are.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs.
And that's the end of that part.
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, same.
I'm going to immediately jump in here and say that I really enjoyed this because, like, I think we're, 100? Oh, there you go. It says down here at the bottom, 148 pages through. And I think this is kind of like, this was like a jumping up point where it was like, now things are going to get like real messy.
Yeah.
So
this is the point at which the story goes from like, yeah, I'm on board with this to, okay, this is a really good and interesting story. And it's definitely not something I've seen before, which I feel like if the basis of the story is that like your main character is very flawed and she's going to continue to make mistakes and stuff like that, there has to be a point where she makes or they make like a really big mistake. Yeah.
And I feel like this whole thing with Max, where it's like, you know, as the reader, you've had the rules explained to you. You know how stories work as well. Yeah. And so like this kind of revision, like, you know, it's going to go horribly wrong. Well, and so it kind of,
the ramp up to it is perfect too, because it goes from like petty. Wow, that was bad to, oh my God, you're completely ruining this guy's life by changing everything.
Yeah. It's
so it was just the arc of it was very good.
Yeah. So I thought part 4 was really good.
Yeah. All right. You want to take part 5 for us then?
I will. Part 5 is called Max. Mm-hmm. Katie realizes that Max and her now live together. And at first, it's all sunshine and rainbows and morning sex, which I will like to say here is not a thing. Morning sex is disgusting. It is gross.
Okay, fine. You're entitled to your wrong opinion.
And your ass is stanky, and your dick is stanky, and your breath is stanky. Go and have a shower and then have sex. Jesus Christ. If you listen, like if you fuck in the morning, that is totally between you and your significant other. That is, sorry, you and your significant others. I don't know what kind of situation you've got going on here, but if you want to do it in the morning, you leave me out of it.
That's fair.
Anyway, they then head to Lucky's, and she's shocked to find progress has reversed, and now they owe $18,000 instead of $12,000. Oh shit! Yeah. Also, Max and the construction dude are incredibly condescending towards Katie. As she's yelling at the dude for being a sexist piece of garbage, she realizes Max and her are now actually married. Oh, and she's also having an affair with Andrew. Oopsies.
Yeah, it's all bad from now on.
Oops. No, it's not great. After remembering that it was her decision to choose Lucky's instead of Talmadge, Katie decides to fix that too. As she goes to eat the mushroom, Liz bites her head and they get a vision of the tree. It shows many versions of Seconds in its various branches and the dresser drawers built into the trunk. Back in reality, she is in awe of what she's seen. But not understanding it, eats the mushroom anyway, which makes Liz even angrier. Classic main character. So then we get into revision number 7. So they go with Talmadge instead of Luck now. The darkness out of the floorboards takes on a humanoid form. Katie calling it her restaurant pisses off Max. Ugh. She finds out the restaurant is to be called MK2, which is Max and Katie's second restaurant. It's very clever. And then it's under budget, under scheduled, and nearly finished. Mm-hmm. Also, she hates everything about the design.
Yes.
Max lectures Katie on how you need to compromise once in a while. Her whole life is currently a compromise to have gotten Max, she's realizing, and Max is clearly mad but won't show it, so she goes back to the mushrooms, which are now hidden in her room. Liz sees them and freaks out and vanishes. She revises yet again so she doesn't fight with Max.
Yep.
And there's actually like a bunch of revisions as well.
Yeah, there's a bunch of quick ones, which we should probably just go through real fast, because this is where like the whole snowball effect starts with her trying and failing to make her life in quote unquote perfect.
Yeah. It's that classic old lesson that, be grateful for what you have or something like that.
Sure.
And also don't eat weird mushrooms out of a pot.
Yeah. Or that you found under your floorboards.
Yeah. Real solid life advice. So revision 8, Katie basically rolls everything over to Max so that he's feeling great, but her, not so much. The darkness grows. Revision number 9. While making the menu, her and Max fight the entire time. She senses he used to think she was perfect, but he doesn't think that anymore. She fixes the problem again, and the darkness continues to grow. Revision 10. Katie has a breakdown in front of Max about how she wants everything to be perfect, but keeps messing it up. She dreams of darkness and then of skeleton men tearing through the different dimensions of seconds. And that takes us into part 6, control.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you, but I was starting to get a decidedly bad feeling by this point.
Yeah, it was really kind of heartbreaking seeing Katie basically giving up everything just because she's so obsessed with making her relationship with Max work. It's a very good metaphor for what a lot of people do in bad relationships, where they want so bad to make it work that they give up like their own goals and dreams and do everything the other person wants, and it's never enough. I mean, that's just not how healthy relationships work. Like, yes, there's compromise, but there is a point at which it is no longer a compromise, and it is just you rolling over to what the other person wants. And that was really struck me this time reading through, when she realizes like he used to think I was perfect, but as we've seen in these revisions, when it shows like the revised version, she's basically walking through life like she's kind of like in a fugue state. So it's like, so to Max, his perfect version of Katie is just like this non-person almost that just does whatever he wants. That's really disturbing. Like that does not say good things about Max as a person.
No, it does not. It's just very bad things about him.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So, I really, really like, this is where I just like couldn't read fast enough to like get to the good stuff. And then the part where it's like where revision 10 ends and you just see these like giant skeleton men like tearing through dimensions. I was like, I don't know like what this is saying, but it is like, I mean, it comes together later, but in the moment it is just so like weird for what's even like with the weirdness that's happened so far. It's like on a totally other level, which is, I guess,
super creepy.
Yeah. I guess it's the thing showing you like, yeah, things are about to get really bad from all these revisions she's been doing. So that takes us into part 6, control. Katie goes over to Hazel's and she is given this story that Hazel grew up with, and it's about 2 house spirits. It's actually like a family moves into a new house. They accidentally bring the house spirit from their previous residence, which it was living like in an old trunk or whatever, and they fight over the house. And this is actually what Hazel thinks is what's happening with Seconds and why things have been going so bad. And the story I thought was kind of interesting because it shows like, basically the point is like different house spirits want different things. So even if you're trying to please one of them, the other one might not like it. So it's like, yeah, she's clearly brought something over. So that's what Hazel's theory is. So when Katie then goes back to Seconds, she sees there's like skeleton people in this version of reality that are just kind of hanging out. Which seem like they're just
they're not very threatening.
No, they're not threatening at all. They're just like regular people. And when she like brings it up, they're just like, you hired them. Like, what's the problem? Like the other employees, like this is normal. So this is kind of when we're getting the hints that like, this isn't just revising history. She's actually like shifting dimensions instead of just like altering a timeline, which I thought was an interesting way to go to show that. Also, I don't remember if it was this part or one of the other parts with the skeleton men, but one of them has like playing a woodwind instrument, and she's like, how is he even doing that? Which I thought was very funny. So she corners Andrew in the kitchen and is telling him that it's over between the two of them. and Max overhears them. So this is like the first time, because they mentioned before, like everyone else knew they were having an affair, but Max is kind of clueless about it. And he either just totally doesn't want to accept that it's happening or is just completely oblivious. But we kind of get the sense that it's that, like, he's just oblivious to this situation.
I mean, considering his ideal version of Katie is someone who just kind of stands there and goes along with whatever he says.
Right.
I feel like he is a pretty fucking oblivious person.
Yeah, that is fair. So he wants to like talk things out, but she ends up just like crying and running upstairs and locking the door on him. And she's looking around for all the stuff, and he has found the notebook, and he's like, what is this? Because this is really detailed. Like, he's like, at first I thought it was a diary of you confessing, you know, these bad things you did, but then it got like weirdly specific about things that haven't actually happened. So yeah, it's like the notebook is clearly shifting with her because those old versions are still in there for him to have found.
They're all still there. Yeah.
So she is like, well, it doesn't say that you have to write it down in that notebook. In fact, the notebook she mentions looks new compared to everything else around this whole mythology. So she just finds the receipt from the burger place, which I also thought was interesting because didn't she not do the burgers? So, but maybe in this reality she did. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh. In one reality, I'm married, but I did eat a burger.
Naughty, naughty. So she freaks out, and on the back of it, she writes how she should have broken it off with Andrew right away. Like, right away. Is that what she writes? And then she scratches that out and just says, I should have fired Andrew after 2 weeks for being such a cocky loudmouth, and eats the mushroom. And she's like, well, I don't have time to sleep. So she just stands there and waits. And then the next revision starts. So we get the next part, which is called Revision 11. And Andrew, we see he just is like doing his thing, cooking, and he looks up and just vanishes. And Katie feels, it's messed up.
Disappears.
Yeah. And then Katie actually feels the whole world like shift and shudder this time, which she's never been awake for the shift. So it's one of those, does this always happen, or is it because things are going so wrong? We don't know. But the big thing is Max is no longer pounding on the door. But when she opens the door, the notepad's just on the floor where he had been standing. So she changes her sweater just so that she has one with pockets so that she can grab the last 2 mushrooms. And she puts one in each pocket and heads downstairs. So, I did really like this section because of the way it's ramping up to, like head us into a finale. I'm very on board with like what's happening and the shifting realities and like how they ramp up the weirdness with the skeletons and stuff, and like showing that she's just making, like, even now when she should know better, she's still making the mistake of like, instead of breaking it off with Andrew, she fires him, where it's like, yeah, that's not cool. Like, yet again, you're just totally messing with Andrew this entire time, which sucks.
Yeah.
So what did you think of this part?
I thought this part was really good because, like, it because of everything that had kind of come before. You know, when things start getting really weird and there's like skeletons showing up, and then like the reality shifts while she's awake, and like all this kind of stuff happens, like. And I'll probably talk more about this in the next part, but like, it doesn't feel out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. It all feels really earned and really natural. And so like when things start going really, really crazy, it feels really like satisfying in a way to kind of see the, let's say the fruits of Katie's labor,
right?
The really fucked up fruits of her labor. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed this part, for the ramping up. And as we will see, that trend continues.
Yes. So you want to take us into 7 question marks, which was the name of the next section?
I shall. Reality shifts again as she walks downstairs. Something has changed without her doing it. The restaurant is packed and her employees are all wearing star-patterned uniforms, and also skeleton people are still there, including a skeleton band.
Oh, this is where the band comes in. Yes.
Yeah. And she's like playing a woodwind. The food looks really weird, and the menu lists a bunch of sci-fi sounding animals. And so she finds Max in the kitchen and hugs him, and she seems very glad that he is there. but then things shift again. And there is like this really creepy panel where like everything's red and Max is just an outline. She's standing in the kitchen by herself and the kitchen's all like ruined. Mm-hmm. I thought that was very, very cool. Yeah. I thought it was a really, really good panel. So things shift again, and now Yana is hugging Max, and Max loves her instead, with Yana being one of the other.
Yeah, she's one of the servers. That's been there for throughout the book, kind of as a background character.
Yeah. So the pictures on the wall are now of Max and Yana. Katie pulls out one of the last 2 mushrooms and an unseen force pulls it away. She chases it into the darkness and is confronted by a creature with tentacles that you can't really see. It steals her sweater and that has the last mushroom in it. She finds Max in the kitchen, but he doesn't know her, and she finds Hazel, whose burns on her arms spontaneously return. They drive through the snow to Lucknow, and it is still a wreck. She tells Hazel how it was going to be Katie's, and Hazel asks if she took something from it. Katie, of course, realizes it's the witch's pot.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Yeah.
Finally figured it out.
So, yeah, that I kind of want to just roll into the next part, if that's cool with you, because this is where it's just, this is the big, crest of the story, and then I just want to talk about it. That's all.
Okay, so part 7, can't go back. On the drive back, Hazel vanishes from the car. Then Katie appears in her bed holding the old children's book that Hazel would use to explain the house spirits. Liz returns to explain that the ash and the dirt that Katie put on the mushrooms before brought the other spirit. The darkness shows up and Liz gets scared and flees. Katie tries to save Liz's drawer from the creature and sees her own face in the darkness. Katie awakes in a dark, empty world. The darkness tells her that Katie keeps abandoning worlds each time she changes things. She's waking up as a different Katie each time, which is why she doesn't remember her life in that world. She was also fighting the house spirit for ownership of Lucky's, which is why nothing was ever finished. Katie promises to take the darkness home, and it reveals itself to be a dark version of her, kind of like the Negascott. But they take the witch's pot back to Lucky.
I think better realized, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. They take the witch's pot back to Lucky's and put wood under it. It lights, and the dark version of Katie is happy to be home for the first time. The Lucky sign lights up. Katie finds the final mushroom that fell out of the back of her car and drives back to Seconds. She finds a tiny Liz asleep in the drawer of the dresser in the snow. She falls asleep next to it. Liz nibbles on the mushroom in her sleep. Katie wakes up at the hospital and Arthur is watching over her. She was found exhausted, malnourished with hypothermia, and a stomach full of mushrooms.
Just like
Hazel
Karen.
shows up, and just like me. Hazel shows up, and we learn it's back to square one. Hazel's arms are still burned, but their friendship remains. It was the one constant through the different realities. Katie tells Raymond her big revelation that there are things you can't change, and you just have to accept and move on. He points to a huge sign behind him with the classic Mom House poster that reads, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. With the house spirit and Katie on good terms, Katie's finally opens, weeks late and over budget, but Katie is still happy. She still goes back to Seconds and leaves bread on the rafters, but never sees another house spirit.
Yeah. So this brings us to the finale and our final thoughts, and I really liked the ramp up and resolution in these sections where it just goes with the question mark chapter, just completely insane of like this weird reality. And then it starts shifting without her having any control. And it's like that other house spirit, now that it has all the mushrooms, is just messing with her and pushing her into these like awful dimensions like that are worse for her. Whereas she had been, basically using the power to do the exact opposite of what Katie had been doing the entire time. And the reveal of Katie's actions having way more dire of consequences than I was expecting on like the first time I read it, because she's abandoning these worlds and it shows them, and there's a husk of Max next to her in the bed, and like Seconds is all like burned down looking, and it's just, and she said it's like there's always like a blizzard, and she said it looks like it's erasing things as the snow falls down, which leads to where Hazel gets erased in that one scene. I loved all that. It was like the perfect mix of like creepy, but really interesting, and really drove the story forward. And I think, like you had mentioned earlier, it felt earned because the ramp up was so well done to the really, 100%. To the really like supernatural type stuff.
Yeah. No, I would. Everything you said, yes.
Okay. I did it. So Kieran, why don't you give us your final thoughts, and would you recommend this book?
I would 100% recommend this book. I would super recommend this book. As a follow-up to Scott Pilgrim, I think it is excellent because it showcases Bryan Lee O'Malley's writing talents and his artistic talents as well. It has a different vibe and a different style, and certainly a different, not a completely different message to Scott Pilgrim, but certainly a slightly different one. But I think probably one of the most significant changes between this and Scott Pilgrim, and I regret to constantly compare to it, but whatever, is that Scott Pilgrim and Katie are both very well written characters, but Katie is infinitely more likable and much more fun to spend time with as a character.
Yes, even with all her flaws.
Even with so I think that the book's greatest strength is Katie, which makes sense because she's the main character. But I think like she is flawed in so many like common ways, I guess, in that like she tries to be a good person, but she's kind of selfish. She binges on booze and fast food, and she is really embarrassing in front of people that she likes, and she makes crappy decisions because she gets emotional. Like she is, she is the epitome of like a hashtag relatable character. And so I think, kind of going along this journey with her is really easy and really fun, because she's such a good character to follow along with, in this kind of journey. And I think as you said, like the nigger Katie, so to speak, the other house spirit, I think that kind of moment and that sort of realization of like, every time you try and alter something that you've already done, you're abandoning other possibilities, you're abandoning other worlds, like that kind of metaphor and lesson of, have the wisdom to know the difference between what you can and can't change. I think that lesson is a lot better realized than the lesson in Scott Pilgrim of, don't be a fucking douche or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you there.
I think the kind of the moral and emotional landing at the end of Seconds is a lot better realized.
Oh yeah.
And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, especially when you read a comic like this, and it's hardcover, full color, it has like chapter names that it kind of fucks with, and it has like lots of interesting panels and sort of formulas and stuff about it. And so like it kind of plays with the medium a little bit. There is a kind of an expectation that when you get to the end, there will be a moment that you go, and this is what we're talking about. This is the big kind of moment where I realize what the thesis here is. And I think this one really like sticks it a lot better than Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah.
So I totally enjoyed this. I think it's really good reading for anyone who's like done anything creatively or otherwise. And you're trying to follow it up with something else. And, for anyone who's ever had regret, for anyone who's ever stressed about a decision of some kind, I think it's a great book. And also it looks amazing. It looks really good. The art is fantastic, and this would definitely be like probably one of the better ones that we've done. I was about to say this year, but it's the end of 2018, so that's a very long year. But I would say it's probably one of my favorite ones that we've done. So awesome. Yeah. Jonah, what do you think?
This is actually one of the ones I put on the list when we first were talking about doing the podcast, and we just kind of started throwing everything at the wall. Like, here's stuff I want to talk about. And the reason I picked this one back then was because I have a feeling like most people I've talked to didn't even know that Bryan Lee O'Malley had done other things besides Scott Pilgrim. And that's kind of it's great because the thesis of this book is Bryan Lee O'Malley basically saying, hey, what happens after you have a really successful first outing? What are you supposed to do with your life after that? Because that's exactly what he was going through with Scott Pilgrim. Like we had talked about in those episodes, he got a movie deal like 1 volume in or something, like some ridiculously quick turnaround on that. So it was this instant, like massive success worldwide, to the point where I'm sure he never had to work again, but he like a true artiste, he made an amazing follow-up that actually deals with a lot of the stuff he was personally going through, but through the lens of, a different medium. He said he worked in a kitchen when he was younger, which is why it was about a restaurant. He said he had like a boss that was like a little bit like a few years older woman that was like, seemed really cool, but he didn't really get to know because she was kind of standoffish. So he's like, that's kind of where some of the inspiration for Katie came from, was this boss that he had. And just that whole thing about when you're getting into your late 20s, early 30s, and you finally are like hitting that point where you feel like I should really have more of my life figured out by this point. And you really, you don't, nobody does, but you feel like you should. This is coming from someone who was, had already been married for several years by that point when I turned 30. And, when I hit 30, it was like around when we were like, if we're going to have kids, we should probably, decide if we really want to do this sort of thing. So like that was actually a huge, life changing turning point for me as well, was 30. So, and not just because of the number, but because we made some pretty major life decisions, at that point, Brittany and I did. So like this character of Katie is so real feeling compared to in Scott Pilgrim. Some of the side characters felt more realistic, whereas Scott always felt like a cartoon character, whereas this book doesn't have that. Like Katie, even with all the magical realism and all that stuff going on, it's like she still feels very grounded, which I really liked. And also it helped that the magical stuff was way more focused in, where Scott Pilgrim, it's like he just kind of threw whatever sounded fun at the time. I'm sure he just threw in there, which works in the context of that book, but there's not really a mythology around Scott Pilgrim. I guess maybe you could argue there is, but like there's stuff like the doorways and stuff that they never really go back to or explain. They're just like, oh, it's a thing we have in America, that it's just like the weird.
It's just a throwaway, thing.
Whereas this one, the entire story revolves around it. And like you said, because it's a standalone volume, the way the storytelling works, it's like, this is definitely like earns a graphic novel. We kind of poked fun at a little bit at the beginning, but to be fair, when people are like, oh, you read comics, and you're the guy that pushes up his glasses and goes, actually, I read graphic novels. This is actually a prime example of the difference. Whereas this is a volume. It tells a story. It could be a novel, but it works better in this medium, which is always one of those things I look for. Like, what is a good example of a book that is more effectively told as a graphic novel versus a movie or a regular novel? This is a primo example. I will point to Seconds any day and say, read this. You will understand what I'm talking about when I say some stories just work better in this medium. So
exactly. Yeah.
So it is one of my highest recommends. And like you said, like I said at the beginning of that, I put it on there immediately, like when we were brainstorming what episodes to do, because I just wanted to make more people aware that it existed. That's it from me. I guess I'll stop gushing. And this was a little bit of a cheat because we again went in for the second time doing a book we knew we liked, like we did with JoJo's. It's a little bit of a cheat, but had to get it out there. It's the end of the year. It's the end of the year. That's our present to ourselves. Plus, I made you buy a copy that was probably twice as much as I had to pay for my copy. So
it's like $45.
God, New Zealand, get your shit together. What is it? What do you got to like ship things halfway across the world or something?
What's the deal with that?
All right,
I think I actually bought this at the same time that I bought JoJo's.
Did you? Okay, well that's fair.
Yeah.
All right, so Kieran, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
You can find me on Twitter. I am at Mr. K_Bennett, or you can check out my Dungeons and Dragons podcast, which is at for CNG Podcast on Twitter. Jonah, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh man, you can find me on Twitter at Spambot, and also I've been streaming on Twitch because we unlocked the goal of streaming some comic book related video games. So I have done a couple streams of X-Men Legends, which is the old PS2 era, like Diablo style, like, you know, that upper view of things, and you get loot, but it's not very loot heavy, but you do level up. I believe it's called
isometric.
Yeah, it is. You got me.
You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. I am at Mr. K_Bennett, or you can check out my Dungeons and Dragons podcast, which is at for CNG Podcast on Twitter. Jonah, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh man, you can find me on Twitter at Spambot. And also, I've been streaming on Twitch because we unlocked the goal of streaming some comic book related video games. So I have done a couple streams of X-Men Legends, which is the old PS2 era, like Diablo style, like, you know, that upper view of things and you get loot. But it's not very loot heavy, but you do level up. I believe it's called
isometric.
Yeah, it is. You got me. And I have a bunch of other stuff raring to go, and if people have, I can keep going through that. If people want to suggest other things, I mean, it's all good. So you can find me on twitch.tv/inksandissues doing that, and follow the show on Twitter so that you know when we go live, etc. Inks and Issues, of course, everywhere. Everywhere you get your podcasts is a thing that people probably have said on podcasts.
Everywhere you go, always take the weather with you. Everywhere. That's a New Zealand song. No one's going to get that.
Okay, well, that's for Logan then. Just like the Firewise thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
Subscribe to our bonus podcast so you can hear New Zealand references that only you and Logan get. Need more mutants, metahumans, and monsters in your life? Then check out these other Geekly Inc. shows like Transformation Sequence, Cthulhu and Friends, and Drunks and Dragons. Help us make the show the best that it can be by supporting us at patreon.com/inksandissues, where you can get bonus content, early access to episodes, and can even vote on comics for us to review. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review to help us spread the word. Interact with us on Twitter at inksandissues or on Twitch at twitch.tv/inksandissues. Now do yourself a favor and go read some gosh dang comics. All right, with that, we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.